Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving into the world of exercise programs for teenagers. Think about it for a second. Imagine coaching a soccer team with teens at all different fitness levels. How do you even begin to build a program that works for everybody and keeps them motivated?
It's tough,
Yeah.
right? Well, luckily, there were actually training guidelines out there specifically for fitness instructors working with adolescents, and that's exactly what we're going to be taking a deep dive into today.
It's funny because so many times people try to just apply adult fitness principles to teenagers, but
Mhm.
teenagers aren't just mini adults.
Yeah, you're totally right. They have such unique needs and considerations. Their bodies are still developing, and honestly, their emotions are all over the place too. So how do these guidelines even address those differences?
Well, the first thing they do is highlight how powerful exercise can be for teenagers. And we're not just talking physically here. We're talking benefits that extend to their social lives, their emotional well-being, and even their ability to focus at school. So it's a lot more than just getting them to run a mile or lift some weights.
Exactly. Think about it. Exercise can help teens build confidence, manage stress, and make friends. All those things that are so important during those awkward teenage years.
Oh, I remember feeling super awkward as a teenager. Actually, it was around that time that I started exercising more regularly, and it definitely helped me feel better about myself.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
And these guidelines actually point out some other interesting reasons why teenagers might seek out fitness programs. Of course, some are focused on losing weight or training for a specific sport.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially if they're trying to make a team or get ready for a big competition.
Right. But other teens might be dealing with body image concerns and wanting to build muscle, what we call hypertrophy. Or they might be feeling awkward and uncoordinated as their bodies change and want a program that can help them gain some confidence.
So it sounds like it's really important to understand what each teen's individual motivation is, and then that helps us figure out how to tailor the right program for them right.
Absolutely. And before we even start designing a workout, these guidelines really emphasize pre-exercise screening. We need to identify any underlying health conditions or risk factors that might affect a teen's ability to exercise safely.
Right, you wouldn't want to push someone too hard if they have a health condition that they aren't even aware of.
Exactly. And they actually recommend using a tool that is specifically designed for young people. It's called the PSSYP. That stands for the Pre-Exercise Screening System for Young People. And it helps us identify any red flags and make sure we're creating a safe and effective program for them.
And of course, we need to get informed consent from a parent or guardian before we even do anything right.
Absolutely. We want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and understands the program, the risks, and the potential benefits. And it's important to remember that all of this information needs to be handled with sensitivity and respect for privacy laws.
So building trust and open communication is key right from the start. Okay, so once we've done the screening, what's next? How do we actually go about assessing a teenager's fitness level?
Well, it's definitely more than just checking their weight and height. The guidelines break down the assessments into two main categories: health-related components and skill-related components.
Okay, what's the difference between those?
So health-related components focus on things like cardiovascular endurance, so that's how well their heart and lungs work during exercise, and then muscular strength and endurance flexibility and body composition, which is the ratio of fat to lean mass in their body.
So it's a pretty comprehensive look at their overall fitness.
Exactly. And then skill-related components look at things like power, speed, agility, coordination, balance, and reaction time. These are super important for sports performance, but also just for moving through life with ease and confidence.
Okay, so let me see if I have this right. If I'm working with that soccer team I was talking about earlier, I might assess their cardiovascular endurance by seeing how long they can run without getting winded, and then maybe assess their agility with some drills that involve quick changes in direction.
Exactly. And the key here is to make these assessments fun and engaging. We don't want teenagers to feel like they're being tested or judged.
Yeah, we want them to feel good about participating and see this as a way to learn more about their bodies and their own abilities.
Exactly. And once we have a good understanding of their fitness level, we can start thinking about the equipment we might use in their program.
Okay, so what kind of equipment is actually safe and engaging for teenagers? I'm assuming we're not throwing them in a weight room with heavy barbells, right?
No, definitely not. The guidelines mention some basic equipment like treadmills, but with a huge emphasis on safety, especially if teens are new to using them. Things like jump ropes, Hand weights and resistance bands are other good options.
I like those. They're versatile and can be used for a variety of different exercises. You can adjust the resistance on the bands to make things easier or harder as they get stronger.
Exactly. But here's the thing. We don't always need fancy equipment to get a great workout.
So you're saying we can get a little creative and use things we already have access to.
Absolutely. Bodyweight exercises are fantastic for teens. And they can be done anywhere. Think push-ups, squats, lunges, planks. Those are all super effective. And of course, outdoor activities like running, hiking, swimming, or playing sports are all great ways to get teens moving.
I love that. It makes exercise more accessible and less intimidating. You don't necessarily need a gym membership or expensive equipment to get fit.
Exactly. And before we move on to actually designing the workout, we need to talk about something super important. How do we make sure that exercise is safe, especially if a teen has a health condition?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. We don't want to make any assumptions or put anyone at risk.
Right. The guidelines stress the importance of medical guidance. So for certain conditions like heart conditions or epilepsy, a doctor's clearance might be necessary before starting any exercise program. And sometimes certain exercises might be what we call contraindicated, meaning they could actually be harmful.
Oh, wow. Can you give an example of that? What does contraindicated actually mean for a teen?
So let's say a teen has asthma. Certain high-intensity exercises might trigger an attack, so we need to be careful with those and make sure they have their inhaler handy. Or if a teen has recently had surgery, we might need to modify their program to allow for proper healing.
So it's about understanding each teen's individual health status and working within those parameters. What other health conditions do the guidelines mention as being relevant to teens?
They highlight conditions like diabetes where exercise can impact blood sugar levels and allergies, especially those that could lead to a serious allergic reaction. They even address sensitive topics like eating disorders and excessive exercise.
Yeah, those are really tough issues. But it's important to be aware of them and know how to handle them appropriately.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to the importance of communication and building a trusting relationship with teens so that they feel comfortable sharing any concerns they might have. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about actually building a workout program using what's called the FITT principle.
Okay.
Okay, so the FITT principle stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type. It's basically a framework for designing any workout program, but it's especially useful when we're working with teenagers because it allows us to tailor the program to their individual needs and abilities.
Okay, I'm listening. Break it down for me. What does each element actually mean when we're talking about teen fitness?
So frequency refers to how often the teen exercises each week. For most teens, aiming for at least 3 to 5 days of exercise is a good starting point.
So we're not necessarily pushing for, like, daily workouts.
Not necessarily. Rest and recovery are just as important as exercise, especially for growing bodies.
Makes sense. Okay, what about intensity? How do we know how hard a teen should actually be working?
There are a few different methods we can use to gauge intensity. Heart rate is one way. We can figure out their target heart rate zone based on their age and fitness level.
So would they need to use a heart rate monitor for that?
They could. Or we can use simpler methods like the talk test. They can carry on a conversation while they're exercising. They're likely in a moderate intensity zone. If they're too out of breath to talk, they might be pushing a little too hard.
I like that. That's a really simple way to check in without needing any fancy equipment.
Exactly. And we can also pay attention to their perceived exertion, so how hard they feel like they're working.
So it's kind of a combination of those objective measures like heart rate and their own subjective feelings.
Precisely. Now, time refers to the duration of each workout session. For teens aiming for at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity most days of the week is a good goal.
Okay, so we're talking about like breaking that hour up into different types of activity.
Exactly. And that brings us to type, which refers to the specific kind of exercise. A well-rounded program for teens will include a mix of cardiovascular activity, strength training, and flexibility.
Let's talk about each of those for a second. What are some examples of cardiovascular activities that are good for teenagers? I keep thinking back to that soccer team example.
Yeah, absolutely. So running is a classic, of course. But we can also get creative with things like swimming, biking, dancing, hiking, even just playing tag or frisbee in the park.
Those all sound really fun.
Yeah.
And it's great that they don't require any special equipment or gym memberships.
Exactly. Now, strength training is another important component, but it's important to approach it safely. We're not talking about heavy weightlifting or anything like that. Bodyweight exercises like push-ups, squats, and lunges are great for building strength without putting too much stress on their joints. We can also use resistance bands or light weights to add some resistance.
Right. I can imagine the teens on that soccer team doing squats to improve their leg strength for kicking the ball.
Exactly. And then flexibility is often overlooked. But it's so important for maintaining range of motion, preventing injuries, and improving posture. Activities like yoga, Pilates, or even just simple stretching can help.
I can see how those would be really beneficial, especially since teens spend so much time these days hunched over their phones or computers.
That's a great point. Now remember that soccer team we've been talking about. Let's shift gears for a second and talk about some of the legal and ethical considerations that we need to keep in mind when we're working with teenagers.
Okay, this sounds serious. What do we need to be aware of?
Well, first and foremost, if you're working with anyone under 18, it's absolutely crucial to be familiar with the working with children check requirements in your state or territory.
Right, that makes sense. It's all about protecting minors and ensuring a safe environment.
Exactly. So these checks basically help screen individuals who will be working with or caring for children and teens. They ensure that anyone working with young people meets certain standards of conduct and has undergone the necessary background checks.
So it's a non-negotiable for anyone involved in youth fitness programs?
Absolutely. And then informed consent is another big one. We talked about getting consent from a parent or guardian earlier, but it's not just about getting a signature on a form. It's about making sure they truly understand the program, the risks, and the potential benefits.
So transparency and clear communication are key.
Exactly. And we also need to be mindful of privacy laws when we're handling sensitive information about our teen clients.
Of course, we want to protect their privacy and make sure they feel comfortable sharing personal details with us. Now, what about the ethical side of things? What principles should guide our interactions with teen clients?
The source material really stresses the importance of always acting in the best interests of the teen. That means being honest and transparent about their progress, avoiding any form of exploitation, and respecting their individual needs and goals.
So it's about putting their well-being first, not pushing them to achieve certain results or meet external expectations.
Exactly. And we also need to be aware of our own limitations. If a teen is dealing with an eating disorder or a mental health challenge, we need to know when to refer them to a qualified professional.
Right. We can't be experts in everything.
Exactly. Now let's dive back into the specifics of exercise programming for a minute. The guidelines offer some really great advice on understanding the physiological differences between adults and adolescents.
You keep saying teens aren't just mini adults, so what are some of the key differences we need to keep in mind when we're actually designing their workouts?
Well, for starters, their bones and muscles are still developing, which means they're more vulnerable to injuries. Their cardiovascular systems are also still maturing, and their hormonal profiles are in flux.
So how do those differences actually impact exercise programming?
Well, it means we need to choose exercises that are developmentally appropriate. So heavy weightlifting or high-impact activities could potentially damage growing bones and joints.
So we need to err on the side of caution and focus on exercises that are safe and effective for their age and stage of development.
Exactly. And gradual progression is key. We don't want to push them too hard too soon. It's all about building a solid foundation and gradually increasing the intensity and complexity of their workouts over time.
And, of course, proper technique is crucial for preventing injuries, right?
Absolutely. We need to make sure they're using proper form and alignment, not just going through the motions.
Okay, so we've talked about safety and progression. Now, what would a well-rounded exercise program for a teen actually look like? What types of activities should we include?
The guidelines recommend a balanced approach that includes cardiovascular activity, strength training, flexibility, and even some elements of fun and play.
Okay, let's unpack each of those a little bit. What are some good examples of cardio for teens?
We talked about running, swimming, and biking earlier, but we can also get creative with like dancing, hiking, jumping rope, or even playing active video games that get them moving.
I love that last one. Using technology to get them excited about exercise.
Exactly. And then strength training doesn't have to be intimidating. Bodyweight exercises, resistance bands, and light weights are all great options.
Can you give me a few examples of those kinds of exercises?
Push-ups, squats, lunges, planks, and rows are all fantastic for building strength. And we can even incorporate games or challenges to make it more fun.
Like a plank challenge to see who can hold it the longest.
Exactly. And then flexibility is important for maintaining that range of motion and preventing injuries. So we can do simple stretches, yoga, or Pilates.
You know, I think it's important to emphasize that exercise doesn't have to be boring or feel like a chore. we can get really creative and find activities that teens actually enjoy.
Absolutely. Incorporating activities they find fun, whether it's playing a sport, dancing, hiking, or even just goofing around with friends can help them stay motivated and make exercise a part of their lifestyle.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where it's challenging but also enjoyable.
Exactly. And communication is a huge part of that. How we talk to teens about exercise can have a big impact on their motivation and engagement.
That makes sense. So what are some tips for effective communication with teenagers?
Well, first and foremost, we need to use clear, concise, and age-appropriate language. Avoid using jargon or technical terms they might not understand.
So no talking about VO2 max or a lactate threshold.
Probably not. Unless they're already familiar with those terms, it's better to explain things in a way that's relevant to their lives and their experiences.
And I imagine patience is key. Teens are still developing their communication skills, so we might need to explain things multiple times or give them time to process information.
Absolutely. And listening is just as important as talking. We need to pay attention to what they're saying, both verbally and non-verbally, and ask clarifying questions to make sure we understand their perspective.
So it's about creating a two-way dialogue, not just lecturing at them.
Exactly. And providing constructive feedback is also important. We want to praise their efforts, acknowledge their progress, and offer specific suggestions for improvement.
So it's about finding that balance between positive reinforcement and helpful critique.
You got it. And we can't forget about body image. This is a sensitive topic for many teens, so we need to be mindful of the language we use and the messages we're sending.
That's such an important point. How can we navigate that sensitive territory in a way that's supportive and empowering?
The guidelines emphasize promoting a healthy and realistic body image. We need to focus on strength, fitness, and overall well-being rather than just appearance or weight loss.
So it's about shifting the focus from how they look to how they feel and what their bodies can actually do.
Exactly. And it's important to be aware of the unrealistic beauty standards that are often portrayed in the media and on social media.
It's like we need to help teens develop a critical lens and recognize that those images are often airbrushed or altered.
Absolutely. And if we suspect a teen is struggling with body image issues or disordered eating, we need to refer them to a qualified professional for help.
Right. That's a good reminder that we're not equipped to handle every situation.
Right. Now let's shift gears again and talk about motivation. How do we keep teen clients engaged and coming back for more?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. Teens are notoriously fickle, so how do we make exercise something they actually look forward to?
Well, the guidelines offer some great tips. First, variety is key. Teens thrive on novelty, so mixing up their workouts and introducing new activities can help keep them engaged.
So no more doing the same boring routine day after day.
Exactly. We also need to set realistic and achievable goals. Teens need to see progress to stay motivated, so breaking down larger goals into smaller milestones can be really helpful.
And celebrating those wins along the way, no matter how small.
Precisely. And positive reinforcement is huge. Praise their efforts, acknowledge their improvements, and create a supportive and encouraging environment.
So be their cheerleader, but in a genuine and authentic way.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of making exercise fun and social. Encourage them to work out with friends, join a team sport, or participate in group fitness classes.
So it's about turning exercise into a positive and enjoyable experience, not just another chore they have to check off their list.
You got it. Now let's switch gears and talk about something a little less fun but equally important. How to deal with common injuries and emergencies that might arise when working with teens.
Uh-oh. That sounds a bit scary. What kinds of things should we be prepared for?
Well, sprains, strains, and even fractures can happen, especially if teens are pushing themselves or trying new activities.
So we need to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of those injuries and know how to provide basic first aid.
Absolutely. And we also need a plan in place for handling more serious emergencies.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Things like asthma, attacks, allergic reactions, or even seizures, which can sometimes be triggered by exercise.
So knowing CPR and first aid is a must.
Absolutely. And it's important to have a clear protocol for contacting emergency services and notifying parents or guardians in case of an incident.
That makes sense. It's all about being prepared and knowing how to respond quickly and effectively in a crisis.
Exactly. And now let's talk about how we can actually track a teen's progress and evaluate the effectiveness of their exercise program.
I'm assuming it's more than just like checking their weight or seeing how many push-ups they can do.
You're right. The guidelines recommend a more holistic approach. We need to consider not only physical changes, but also improvements in their mood, their energy levels, their sleep patterns, and their overall well-being.
So it's about looking at the big picture and how exercise is impacting their lives in multiple ways.
Precisely. And we should gather feedback from the teen themselves, as well as their parents or guardians, to get a well-rounded understanding of how the program is working.
So open communication is crucial throughout the entire process.
Absolutely. And based on that feedback, we can make adjustments to the program as needed to ensure it's meeting the teen's evolving needs and goals.
So it's a dynamic process, not a one-size-fits-all approach.
You got it. And that wraps up our deep dive into the key takeaways from the training guidelines for fitness instructors working with teens.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I have a much better understanding of the complexities of working with this age group. What are your final thoughts? And what do you hope our listeners will take away from this episode?
I think the most important takeaway is that working with teens requires a unique approach, one that considers their physical, emotional, and social development. We need to be patient, understanding, and supportive, and we need to make exercise fun and engaging.
I completely agree. And for our listeners who are interested in learning more about this topic, where can they go for additional information and resources?
Organizations like Fitness Australia offer specialized certifications for fitness professionals working with youth. And there are also many reputable online resources available. We'll be sure to link to some of those in the show notes.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. And we'll see you next time for another in-depth exploration of a topic that matters. As we've been talking about all these guidelines and strategies, I keep thinking back to that idea of teens searching for their identity and independence. Like, how can we actually use that to our advantage when it comes to fitness? Could that be a key to getting them excited about exercise?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great point. And the source material actually touches on this a bit. One really powerful approach is to involve teens in designing their own programs.
Yeah.
So instead of just like dictating a workout, have a conversation with them, talk about their interests, their goals, what they enjoy doing.
So make them feel like they have a voice and some ownership over their fitness journey.
Exactly. It's about empowering them, not just telling them what to do. And remember, teens are social creatures, so another great tactic is to tap into that. Encourage them to work out with friends, set up team challenges, or even have some friendly competitions.
That reminds me of gym class in high school. We used to love the days when we got to play volleyball or basketball. It didn't even feel like exercise.
Exactly. That's the magic of it. And the source material really emphasizes that too, creating that positive and supportive environment that you mentioned earlier. Teens are much more likely to stick with something if they feel comfortable, encouraged, and accepted, no matter their fitness level.
Right. It's about creating a space where they can learn, grow, and have fun without feeling judged or self-conscious.
Precisely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about a topic that's often overlooked, but so important, especially for growing teenagers.
You're talking about nutrition, right? It's got to be more than just telling them to eat their veggies.
You're right. The source material highlights the importance of a balanced diet, one that provides all the essential nutrients teens need for growth, development, and energy.
So we're talking about making sure they're getting enough fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats.
Exactly. It's about building that solid foundation for their overall health. And don't forget about hydration, especially during and after exercise. Water is crucial for regulating body temperature, transporting nutrients, and removing waste products.
So ditch the sugary sports drinks and stick to good old H2O.
For most teens, water is definitely the best choice. And it's also really important to caution against restrictive dieting or getting too focused on calorie counting.
Yeah, I can see how that could be really harmful, especially during a time when their bodies are still growing and need plenty of nourishment.
Exactly. It's not about quick fixes or fad diets. It's about building healthy habits that will last a lifetime.
Education and moderation, not deprivation or obsession.
You got it. Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one final piece of the puzzle that's particularly relevant in today's digital age.
You're talking about technology, right? I mean, teens are basically glued to their phones these days, so how does that play into their fitness?
Well, the source material acknowledges that fitness trackers, apps, and online resources can be useful tools, but it also cautions against relying on them too heavily.
So they can be helpful, but they shouldn't replace human interaction and guidance from a qualified professional.
Exactly. And it's important to make sure teens are using technology in a healthy and balanced way, not getting obsessed with tracking every step or calorie.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where technology enhances their fitness journey,
Yeah,
but doesn't become a source of stress or anxiety.
absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. What are your final takeaways from this deep dive into adolescent exercise programs?
I'm honestly really struck by how much more there is to consider than just the physical aspects of exercise. We've talked about the importance of understanding teen psychology, creating a supportive environment, addressing body image concerns, and even the role of technology.
It's clear that teens aren't just mini adults. They have unique needs, and we need to approach their fitness journeys with a holistic perspective.
I completely agree. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. And for our listeners who want to explore this topic further, we'll be sure to include links to some helpful resources in the show notes.
Great idea.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. And we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of a topic that matters.